Part 1. I'm sorry, but I need to cancel the birthday cake order for Saturday. The words hung in the air of Sweetie's bakery like a death sentence. Diane Miller's fingers trembled as she clutched her purse, knuckles white, jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon that usually brought her comfort now felt suffocating, mocking her failure as a mother. Cancel? Nancy peered over her reading glasses, concern etching lines around her eyes. But Miss Miller, we've already started on the baseball design. Tommy's turning 8, right? Diane's voice cracked. I know. I'm so sorry. Something came up with work. And the lie stuck in her throat. She couldn't say it. Couldn't admit that her hours had been cut at the hospital. Couldn't explain that she'd spent the last 3 nights staring at bills, running the numbers over and over, praying they'd somehow add up differently. They never did. I'll still pay the deposit. I know it's short notice. Nancy reached across the counter and squeezed her hand. Don't worry about the deposit, honey. You can use it another time. Is Tommy very disappointed? He doesn't know yet. Diane wiped at her eyes quickly, angry at herself for crying in public. I'll figure something out. Maybe cupcakes from the grocery store. The words tasted like ash. I just hate to let him down again. What neither woman knew was that a man in the corner booth had stopped breathing. James Harrington, dressed in a charcoal suit worth more than most people's monthly salary, sat frozen with his coffee halfway to his lips. He'd come to this small-town bakery by chance, killing time while his driver filled up the car. His mind had been occupied with stock prices and acquisition deals, the usual noise of a billionaire's life. But something about this woman's posture, shoulders rounded forward, bearing an invisible weight, made every word pierce through his carefully constructed walls. He watched Diane leave the bakery, her head held high despite the tremor in her hands. Through the window, he saw her climb into an aging sedan. She sat motionless for a moment. Then her forehead dropped against the steering wheel, and her shoulders began to shake. James's chest tightened in a way he hadn't felt in years. Tough situation, he said casually as Nancy approached with the coffee pot. Nancy sighed, glancing toward the window. Oh, you have no idea. Diane works harder than anyone I know. 2 jobs, raising that sweet boy alone. Tommy's been talking about this birthday party for months. Baseball theme. He's crazy about it. Keeps saying this is the year the Red Sox scouts will discover him. She smiled sadly. Diane's been saving up, but life keeps throwing curveballs. James nodded slowly, his coffee forgotten. At 42, he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. His charitable foundation donated millions each year, but it had been ages, maybe never, since he'd connected with the human impact of financial struggle. The foundation staff handled the details. He just signed the checks. What kind of cake was it going to be? He asked suddenly. Nancy's eyes brightened. Baseball field design. Green frosting for the grass, white for the bases. Tommy's name on the pitcher's mound. I was going to make little fondant players, too. That boy deserves something special. James pulled out his wallet. I'd like to pay for the cake, and whatever else would make a great party. Nancy stared at him, recognition slowly dawning on her face. You're just someone who remembers what it's like to look forward to a birthday, he interrupted gently. My mother worked 3 jobs. There were years when a cake was a luxury we couldn't afford. The plan expanded within minutes. Not just the cake, but a complete party at the local baseball field. James made calls while Nancy contacted Diane's best friend, Kelly, to coordinate. By the time he left the bakery, James had cleared his weekend schedule. The conference could wait. The acquisition could wait. Something about this situation had stirred memories he'd long buried beneath spreadsheets and board meetings. Memories of his own mother's exhausted smiles, of birthdays that passed with barely an acknowledgement because rent was due, of the shame that burned in a child's chest when other kids talked about their parties and he had to pretend he didn't care. He'd promised himself then that when he had money, he'd never let another child feel that way. But somewhere along the road to billions, he'd forgotten what that promise actually meant. It wasn't about foundation, donations, and tax write-offs. It wasn't about having his assistant cut checks to faceless organizations. It was about this. About a mother's trembling hands. About a boy who loved baseball and deserved one perfect day. James pulled out his phone and made another call. Clear my schedule for the next 4 days, he told his assistant. Something's come up. Something important. 3 days later, Tommy Miller woke up on his 8th birthday expecting nothing more than his mother's traditional pancake breakfast. The past few months had taught him to expect disappointment. Baseball camp had been canceled. Their planned move to a better apartment had been delayed. His mother's smiles had grown increasingly exhausted. He'd overheard enough whispered phone calls to understand that money was tight, though the concept remained abstract to his young mind. He knew his mom worked hard. He knew she was tired. He knew she sometimes cried in her bedroom when she thought he was asleep. But he was 8 now, old enough to understand some things, old enough not to ask for too much. "Ready for your birthday surprise?" Diane asked, her eyes sparkling in a way Tommy hadn't seen in months. "Pancakes?" he guessed, already grateful for the small tradition. "Better. Get dressed. Baseball gear today." Tommy's heart raced as they drove toward the town's baseball field. He spotted balloons tied to the fence and a small gathering of people. "Mom, what's happening?" Diane simply smiled, emotion making it impossible to speak. When they parked, Tommy recognized his friends from school, his Little League teammates, and several adults from the neighborhood. "Surprise!" they shouted as he approached. The baseball field had been transformed. A tent housed a table laden with food and drinks. Baseball-themed decorations hung everywhere. Tommy's friends rushed forward, baseball mitts already on their hands. "We're having your party at a real baseball field," Diane explained, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. Someone very kind wanted to make your birthday special." Tommy was speechless, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. But then he saw the centerpiece, the magnificent cake, exactly like the one he'd described to his mother months ago while flipping through Nancy's cake catalog. The one he'd stopped talking about because he'd seen his mother's face tighten with worry. What Tommy didn't immediately notice was the tall man standing off to the side, watching with an unexpected lump in his throat. James Harrington had spent billions on business deals without blinking. He'd negotiated with world leaders and corporate giants without breaking a sweat. But the pure joy on this child's face affected him in ways he couldn't articulate. His hands were shaking, actually shaking. When was the last time he'd felt anything this real? Part 2. The day unfolded with impromptu baseball games and laughter that echoed across the field. Local coaches volunteered to run drills with the kids. A professional photographer captured moments that would become cherished memories. Through it all, James remained in the background, his expensive suit jacket draped over the bleachers, his tie loosened for the first time in months. He was smiling, actually smiling. His assistant had called twice. He'd ignored both calls. "I can't possibly thank you enough," Diane said, approaching him as Tommy ran the bases with abandon, his face flushed with excitement and pure joy. "You don't need to," James replied simply. "Sometimes life deals unfair hands. I've been fortunate enough to receive more than my share of good cards. It's only right to redistribute the deck occasionally." Diane studied his face, searching for the catch. Rich men didn't just do things like this. There was always an angle. Always something they wanted in return. Her ex-husband had taught her that lesson well. "Why?" she asked bluntly. "Why did you really do this?" James met her eyes, and for a moment, the polished billionaire facade cracked. "Because when I was 7, my birthday fell on the same week my mother got laid off from her second job. We had cereal for dinner. No cake, no party, no presents." His voice roughened. "She cried in the bathroom that night. I heard her through the door, apologizing to God for being a failure. She wasn't a failure. The system failed her." Diane's breath caught. "I'm sorry. Don't be." She worked her way back. "Put me through college working 3 jobs. I built my first company to make sure she'd never have to work again." He paused. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot what it actually felt like. The fear, the shame, the desperate mathematics of choosing between electricity and a cake." He gestured toward Tommy. "Seeing you in that bakery, it all came back. I couldn't walk away." Before Diane could respond, Tommy ran up, breathless and beaming. "Mom, Coach Martinez says I have natural talent. Real talent." "I heard him, baby. I'm so proud of you." Tommy turned to James, his expression suddenly serious. "Mom says you're the reason we had this amazing party. She says you're like a baseball scout, but for people who need help." James crouched down to meet the boy at eye level. "Your mom is the real hero. I just pitched in for one day. She's batting for you every single day." Tommy considered this with the gravity only an 8-year-old can muster. Then, with the unpredictable impulse of childhood, he threw his arms around James's neck in a fierce hug. "This was the best day ever," he whispered. James froze. His hands hovered in the air, uncertain. Then carefully, almost reverently, he returned the embrace. Something shifted in his chest. A wall he hadn't even realized he'd built began to crumble. When Tommy ran back to his friends, James stood slowly, swiping at his eyes. "That was kind of you," Diane said softly. "What you said about me. It was true." He cleared his throat. "Listen, I know this is going to sound strange, but would you and Tommy join me for dinner sometime? Nothing fancy, just I'd like to get to know you both better." Diane's instinct screamed caution, but something in his eyes, a loneliness that mirrored her own, made her hesitate. "Why?" Honest answer? "I don't know. I just know that today reminded me what matters, and I don't want to forget again." He pulled out a business card, handwriting a number on the back. "No pressure, no expectations, just dinner, if you're comfortable with it." She took the card, her fingers brushing his. "I'll think about it." As the sunset painted the sky orange and purple, and children reluctantly headed home, Diane watched James help load presents into her car. He moved with an awkwardness that was oddly endearing, clearly unused to physical labor despite his obvious wealth. "Thank you," she said again. "For all of this. For Tommy. For—" her voice broke. "For giving him one perfect day." "Thank you," James replied. "For letting me be part of it." But as James's driver pulled up in a sleek black Mercedes, reality crashed back. Tommy's eyes widened at the car. Then he looked at his mother's aging sedan, then back at James. "Are you rich?" Tommy asked with childlike directness. James hesitated. "Yes, very." "Oh." Tommy's face fell slightly. "So this was like charity, like when we got Christmas presents from the church." "Tommy," Diane gasped. "No, it's okay." James knelt again. "You're right to ask, but I need you to understand something. Charity is when someone gives because they feel obligated. This was different. I gave because seeing you happy made me happy. Because your mom's courage inspired me. Because sometimes, when life gives you more than you need, the only decent thing to do is share it with people who deserve better than they got." Tommy studied him for a long moment. "Will we see you again? Or is this just a one-time thing?" The question hung in the air. James looked at Diane, then back at Tommy. "That depends on your mom," he said quietly. "But I hope so. I really hope so." Monday morning arrived too quickly. James sat in his executive suite overlooking the Boston skyline, unable to focus on quarterly reports. His assistant had laid out his schedule. Back-to-back meetings, conference calls with Tokyo, a working lunch with the board. He pushed it all aside and pulled out his phone. The text he sent to Diane was simple, thinking about Tommy's smile. Hope his birthday magic lasted through the weekend. Her response came 15 minutes later. "He hasn't stopped talking about it. Or about you. He wants to know if billionaires eat regular food or if they have special rich people meals." James laughed out loud, startling his assistant in the outer office. He typed back, "Tell him I had cereal for breakfast. Frosted Flakes. Very pedestrian. He'll be disappointed. He's convinced you eat gold-covered waffles. Dinner Thursday? I'll prove I eat normal food. Your choice of restaurant." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. James held his breath. "Okay. But somewhere Tommy can wear jeans. And nowhere that requires a reservation 6 months in advance. Deal." Part 3. Thursday came faster than Diane expected. She changed outfits 3 times, cursing herself for caring so much. It was just dinner. Just a thank you. Nothing more. "You look pretty, Mom," Tommy said, catching her checking her reflection for the 5th time. "I look the same as always." "No, you don't. You're smiling different. Like you used to before Dad left." The observation pierced her heart. "Come on, baby. We don't want to be late." James had chosen a local diner, the kind with vinyl booths and a jukebox that actually worked. He was already there when they arrived, looking oddly out of place in jeans and a plain button-down shirt. No tie, no suit jacket. Just a man trying too hard to look casual. "You came," he said, relief flooding his face. We said we would, Diane replied, sliding into the booth across from him. Tommy squeezed in beside her, eyes wide with curiosity. So, Tommy announced, Mom says you're not supposed to ask people how much money they have. But I want to know if you have enough to buy a baseball team. Tommy. Diane's face flushed. James laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Technically, yes, but I won't. You know why? Why? Because owning a team would mean watching from a luxury box instead of the bleachers. And the bleachers are where the real fans sit, where the love of the game lives. Tommy considered this seriously. That's actually pretty smart. Over burgers and milkshakes, something unexpected happened. They talked. Really talked. James asked Tommy about school, about his favorite players, about his dreams. Tommy asked James about growing up poor, about building companies, about whether being rich was as cool as it seemed on TV. Honestly, James said, money solves some problems and creates others. It can't buy the feeling I had at your party, watching you hit that ball. It can't buy your mom's courage or your kindness. But it bought the party, Tommy pointed out, with 8-year-old logic. Fair point, James grinned. Let me rephrase. Money is a tool, like a baseball bat. It's only as good as the person using it and what they choose to do with it. Diane watched them, her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't name. Tommy was laughing, animated in a way she hadn't seen since his father left. And James was different, too softer, more human, stripped of the billionaire armor. Can I ask you something? Diane said during a lull in conversation. Anything. What do you really want from us? Because in my experience, people like you don't just have dinner with people like me unless there's an angle. James set down his coffee, his expression serious. People like me? Rich people. Powerful people. People who have everything and everyone at their disposal. He was quiet for a long moment. You want honest? Always. I'm lonely, Diane. I have 1,000 employees, 12 homes, more money than God, and I'm profoundly, desperately lonely. His voice dropped. When I saw Tommy's face at that party, when I felt him hug me, something woke up inside me that I thought was dead. The ability to feel, to connect, to matter to someone for reasons that have nothing to do with my bank account. So we're what? A charity case that makes you feel good about yourself? No. The word came out sharp. You're a woman who works 2 jobs and still manages to raise an incredible kid. You're someone who chose to pay her bills instead of buying a cake because that's what responsible parents do. You're real in a way no one in my world is real. He paused. And I'm hoping, God, I'm hoping that maybe we can be friends. That maybe I can be part of your lives in some small way. Diane opened her mouth, then closed it. She wanted to say yes, wanted to trust the sincerity in his eyes. But her ex-husband had been sincere too, right up until the day he walked out. I need to use the bathroom, Tommy announced, sliding out of the booth with perfect timing. Once he was gone, Diane leaned forward. I can't let him get hurt again. He's already been abandoned by one man who promised to stick around. I won't let it happen twice. I understand. Do you? Because Tommy's already attached to you. I can see it. He talks about you constantly, asks when you're coming back. And if you disappear, if this is just some phase you're going through. It's not a phase. How do I know that? How do I know you won't wake up next week and realize slumming it with the single mom and her kid has lost its novelty? James's jaw tightened. Because I've spent 20 years building an empire and I've never once felt as alive as I did watching your son run those bases. Because for the first time since my mother died, I feel like I have a purpose that matters beyond profit margins. His voice broke slightly. Because when I'm with you two, I remember who I wanted to be before I became who I am. Diane's throat tightened. That's a pretty speech. It's the truth. Truth is cheap. Staying is hard. Then let me prove it. Let me show you I'm not going anywhere. Tommy returned, oblivious to the tension. Can we get dessert? Mr. James, have you ever had their chocolate cake? It's almost as good as Nancy's birthday cake. Then we absolutely have to try it, James said, his eyes never leaving Diane's face. Your mom and I were just discussing future dinner plans. What do you think, Tommy? Should we make this a regular thing? Yes. Tommy bounced in his seat. Can we? Mom? Please? Diane looked at her son's hopeful face, then at James's vulnerable expression. Against every instinct screaming caution, she heard herself say, "Once a week. We'll see how it goes." "Once a week," James agreed, relief washing over his features. "I'll take it." But as they finished dessert and said their goodbyes in the parking lot, Diane couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life. "He really likes you, Mom," Tommy said on the drive home. "Like, really likes you, I can tell. Don't be silly, we're just friends. Friends don't look at each other the way you two do. And what would you know about it? You're 8. I'm 8.5. And I'm not blind." Tommy paused. "Would it be okay if I liked him too? Like if he became more than just the cake guy?" Diane's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Baby, let's just take things one day at a time, okay? That's what you always say when you're scared." Sometimes, Diane thought, her son was too perceptive for his own good. Part 4. The weekly dinners became a fixture in their lives. 6 weeks passed, then 2 months. James showed up every Thursday without fail, sometimes straight from the airport, his tie loosened and exhaustion in his eyes, but always there, always present. He came to Tommy's baseball games, cheering from the bleachers like any other parent. He helped with homework, his billion-dollar mind puzzling over third-grade math problems with surprising patience. He fixed Diane's car when it broke down, arriving in jeans and getting grease under his fingernails. "You know you could have just paid someone to do this," Diane said, watching him work under the hood. "Where's the fun in that?" He grinned up at her, a smudge of oil on his cheek. "Besides, my mother made sure I knew how to fix things. Said rich or poor, a man should know how to take care of what matters. And my car matters? You matter," he said simply. "Therefore, your car matters." The simplicity of the statement stole her breath. She was falling for him. The realization hit her like a freight train. She was falling for James Harrington, and it terrified her. That night, after Tommy went to bed, she called her best friend, Kelly. "I'm in trouble," Diane whispered into the phone. "What kind of trouble?" "The falling in love with a billionaire kind of trouble." Kelly laughed. "Honey, that's not trouble. That's a fairy tale. Fairy tales aren't real. And this can't possibly end well." "Why not?" "Because," Diane's voice rose, then dropped again. "Because his world and mine are galaxies apart. Because eventually he'll realize I'm just a struggling single mom with nothing to offer him. Because Tommy will get attached and then James will leave and my son will be heartbroken all over again. Or," Kelly said gently, "James could be exactly who he seems to be. A good man who genuinely cares about you both. People like him don't end up with people like me." "Says who?" "Diane, you're smart, beautiful, strong, and you've raised an amazing kid against impossible odds. Maybe it's time you realized you're the catch here, not him." But 3 days later, Diane's worst fears materialized. She was leaving the hospital after her shift when she saw James in the parking lot, leaning against his Mercedes. Her heart leapt until she saw his expression. Something was wrong. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight. Her stomach dropped. "Okay. There's a business crisis in California. Tech merger falling apart. Hundreds of jobs on the line. I have to fly out tonight and I don't know when I'll be back." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by shame at her own insecurity. "Of course. Go. Do what you need to do. I'm going to miss Thursday dinner. James, people's jobs are at stake. We understand." He stepped closer, his hands cupping her face with a tenderness that made her knees weak. "I don't want to go. That's the problem. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 6 months ago, I would have already been on the plane. Work always came first. But now," he pressed his forehead to hers, "now all I can think about is missing Tommy's game on Saturday. Missing you. We'll be here when you get back. Promise me." His voice was urgent, almost desperate. "Promise me you won't use this as an excuse to pull away. I can see it in your eyes, Diane. You're waiting for me to leave, expecting it. Don't let my business trip become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm not. You are. And I get it. He left you. Tommy's father walked away and taught you that men can't be trusted. But I'm not him." Diane pulled back, anger flaring. "Don't psychoanalyze me. Then don't sabotage us before we've even had a real chance. There is no us, James. There's a rich guy feeling charitable and a single mom who should have known better than to let her kid get attached. The words hung between them like poison. James's face went pale, then hard. Is that really what you think this is? I don't know what to think anymore. Then let me make it crystal clear. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Diane's breath stopped. I was going to wait. Do this properly. But clearly, you need proof that I'm serious about this. About us. James, don't. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a single diamond. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed billionaire. Just beautiful and real and terrifying. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I know you're not ready. His voice shook. But I'm asking you to believe that I will ask. Someday. When you trust me enough. When you believe I'm not going anywhere. Diane stared at the ring, her heart hammering. This is crazy. Probably. We've only known each other 3 months. I know. Tommy's gonna freak out. Good freak out or bad freak out. Despite everything, she laughed. It came out half sob. I don't know. Both. James, I'm scared. So am I. He closed the box and pressed it into her hand. Keep this. Think about it while I'm gone. And when I come back, we'll talk. Really talk. About what we both want. What this could be. What if what we want is impossible? Then we figure it out together. But Diane, I need you to stop expecting me to leave. Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm here. I'm staying. Even when business drags me to California. Even when life gets complicated. I'm not walking away from you or Tommy. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and full of promise. When he pulled away, there were tears on both their faces. Go save those jobs, she whispered. I'll call every day. You don't have to. I want to. I need to hear your voice. Tommy's voice. It's what keeps me human in that world. He left that night. Diane went home, clutched the ring box in her shaking hands, and cried. Tommy found her on the couch an hour later. Mom, why are you sad? She pulled him close. I'm not sad, baby. I'm just confused. About Mr. James? About everything. Tommy was quiet for a moment. He's coming back, Mom. I know he is. How can you be so sure? Because he looks at us the way you look at me. Like we're the most important thing in the world. And people don't look at other people like that and then just leave. From the mouths of babes, Diane thought. If only trust were as simple as an 8-year-old believed. Part 5. James called every night like he promised. But 2 weeks, stretched into 3, then 4. The merger was more complicated than anticipated. Each call grew shorter, his voice more exhausted. I miss you, he said on night 17. The words barely audible over the static of a bad connection. We miss you too, Diane replied, watching Tommy pretend not to listen from the hallway. Is he okay, Tommy? She paused. He's asking questions. About when you're coming back. About whether you're staying in California forever. Silence on the other end. Then, put him on. Tommy took the phone with trembling hands. Mr. James? Hey, buddy. Your mom says you're worried about me. Are you coming back? The question came out small, fragile. Dad said he'd come back too, but he didn't. Diane heard James's sharp intake of breath through the speaker. Tommy, listen to me. I know your dad hurt you. Hurt both of you. But I need you to understand something. I'm not your dad. I don't make promises I can't keep. Then promise you're coming back. I promise. In fact, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. The merger can wait, you and your mom can't. Tommy's face lit up. Really? Really? And Tommy? When I get back, I need to ask your mom something important. But first, I need to ask you something. Man to man. Diane's heart stopped. What? Tommy asked, his voice suddenly serious. How would you feel if I wanted to be part of your family? Not just Thursday dinners and baseball games. Really part of it. Forever. The silence stretched so long Diane thought the connection had dropped. Then Tommy whispered, Do you mean like a dad? If you'd let me, I know I can't replace your father. Wouldn't try to. But I'd like the chance to be someone you can count on. Someone who shows up. Someone who loves you and your mom the way you both deserve. Tommy looked at Diane, his eyes shining with tears. Mom? She couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. She nodded, her own tears falling freely. She says yes, Tommy said into the phone. We both say yes. James's laugh was half sob. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Both of you. I love you, Tommy. I love you too, Mr. James. I mean, he paused. What do I call you now? Whatever feels right to you, buddy. We'll figure it out together. James arrived the next afternoon, unshaven and rumpled from the red-eye flight. He didn't go home to change, didn't stop at his office. He came straight to Diane's apartment and knocked on the door at 2:30 in the afternoon. Diane opened it, her heart in her throat. They stared at each other for a long moment. I left $1 billion merger on the table, he said. You what? Told them to handle it without me. Resigned from the board effective immediately. Promoted my CFO to CEO. James, you can't just... I can. I did. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Diane, I've spent 20 years building an empire, and in 3 months with you and Tommy, I felt more alive than in all those 20 years combined. So I made a choice. The company will survive without me, but I won't survive without you. That's insane. Probably. He pulled out the ring box again, opening it with shaking hands. But I've been thinking about what you said, about our worlds being too different. And you're right, they are. So I'm choosing yours. You can't just give up everything. I'm not giving up anything. I'm gaining everything. He dropped to one knee, and Diane's breath caught. I'm still keeping the foundation, still doing the work that matters. But no more chasing profits for the sake of profits. No more missing what's important. Diane Miller, will you marry me? Will you let me be Tommy's father? Will you give me the chance to prove every single day that I'm not going anywhere? Tommy burst from his room, unable to contain himself any longer. Say yes, Mom. Please say yes. Diane looked at her son's hopeful face, at James's vulnerable eyes, at the simple ring that represented a future she'd never dared imagine. I'm terrified, she whispered. So am I, James replied. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone without you. She thought about the moment in the bakery when she'd canceled that cake, broken and defeated. She thought about the birthday party that had changed everything. About weekly dinners and fixed cars and a man who'd walked away from billions to be here now, on his knees in her tiny apartment. Sometimes life dealt unfair hands, but sometimes, just sometimes, it dealt miracles. Yes, she said. And the word felt like freedom. Yes, I'll marry you. James slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into his arms. Tommy wrapped himself around both of them, and for a moment, they just stood there, holding each other. 3 people who'd found family in the most unexpected way. I can't believe you quit your company, Diane murmured against his chest. Best decision I ever made. Second best was walking into that bakery. Best was falling in love with you. 6 months later, they stood in that same bakery, cutting a wedding cake that Nancy had insisted on making. Tommy, in his junior groomsman's suit, beamed at the crowd. Eleanor Harrington, James's mother, cried happy tears in the front row. The guest list was small, intimate, filled with people who mattered. As James and Diane swayed to their first dance, he whispered in her ear, "Thank you for letting me cancel my old life for this one. Thank you for seeing us when we were invisible to everyone else." Tommy ran up, tugging on James's sleeve. "Can I cut in? I want to dance with my mom. And my dad." The words settled over them like a blessing. James pulled Tommy into their embrace, and they danced together, all 3 of them. A family built not on blood or obligation, but on choice. On second chances. On a canceled cake that had led to everything. On the simple truth that sometimes the smallest moments of kindness can reshape entire lives. And sometimes walking away from everything you've built is the only way to build something that truly matters.